Well, this quick tip is going to be a companion to the previous one, which was quick tip 581, in case you want to watch it first. And it's in answer to a request of a person asking for how to use watercolor brushes. So I'm not going to read the whole thing again, but her request was how to use the watercolor brush, because even though she'd had watercolor classes, she's never really been shown how to use the brushes. So we're just going to correct that right now. Well, if you want to have success with watercolor, you don't want to buy your brushes at the dollar store. I noticed that they have a package of like maybe 4 or 5 watercolor brushes for something like maybe $5.95 or something like that. Those won't do the job for you. Seriously, the round brush is just as important as the flat brushes to the watercolor painter. But the round brush can do some things that are different than a flat brush can do. Now, what kind of round brush you want to get? Get one that if you're able to take it off the shelf, sometimes these round brushes will come in packages you're not able to. If you dare, and if you don't offend the clerks of the business, if you do something like this, pull the brush down like that and flip it back, and if it comes back to a perfect point like that, chances are it's a good quality watercolor brush. But to know what's right in here is important. Now this is this is made by the same company as my favorite flat brush. This is my workhorse round brush. It is the Cheap Joe Dreamcatcher watercolor brush. Now, this is a number 12, and maybe bigger than you want to start out with, but don't start out with one that's extremely small. Maybe no bigger, no smaller, maybe a number 10, because you want to have the capacity, full capacity of what the brush can do for you. So, how do we use a round brush? Well, then that comes down to how the round brush works on dry paper and how the round brush works on wet paper. So first of all, to wet the brush, you wet it really good. Now here's what I like to do. This is important. When you wet the brush for the round brush, when you want to blot that water out, give it a turn with your fingers. Just see what I'm doing here? As you pull it towards you on your blotting pad. Try to avoid this kind of thing, because you see what happens when you do? The brush loses its shape. So you want it to maintain its shape while you're working with it. So wet it really, really good, hit your blotting pad and pull and roll it just like that, and you'll have enough water in there. Now, if you're pulling the paint directly from your wells, and I went through in the previous video, 581, I went through the wetting of the paint to get it to work right for you. So I think maybe watching that one again would be a good idea if you don't already know this stuff. Pulling the paint out. If you already have your paint pulled out, you don't have to worry about this. And usually when we're using the round brush, we will already have had our paint pulled out. But if you don't have any paint pulled out, go into the paint well and gently pull it over that wet surface, just like that. If you might want to roll it a little bit, I find myself doing both things. Pull it and then give it a little bounce against the palette. Now you see, that is not quite wet enough. So I just dip the tip of the brush in the water, go back into the paint, roll it, and just pull it. But don't stir it like that, because if you do, you're going to get lumps of paint on your brush. You don't want that. So you want it to come down on the palette like this, nice and dark, like that. Now this will be what we work from, just like when I was explaining in the previous quick tip, that we want the paint we work from, we want on the palette, not in the wells, because if you have a color in your brush and you dip it into another color of your well, you're going to contaminate that color, and you're going to change it in a way that's going to make it impossible for you to get that color back. So it's not a good practice to do that. It's always a good practice to rinse the brush thoroughly, dry it, and then dip it into the fresh water that you use for your painting process. And again, always, you see, I automatically do this when I'm working with a round brush. If you just see what I'm doing here, and then you put it down, just let it rest on your drawing pad at an angle like this, and pull it towards you as you turn it in your fingers. You see what I'm doing here? Just like that. Now, your arm movement affects how the round brush works. So if you have, once you have your brush loaded, now we're going to pull from the edge of the paint. See what I'm doing there? Pull from the edge of the paint and just pull it out and down until you have the value that you want. As I explained in the other quick tip, in watercolor we don't use white paint. We use the water for the white. The paper will be the white. So we control it by control the value of the paint by the amount of water that we put in the brush. So in loading the round brush, it's a good idea to let the belly and the tip of the brush roll in the paint. You see, like that? And I always just give it, usually I give it just a pull forward like that to get the point back on the brush like that. All right, now, when we make, as I said before, the way you move your arm and your wrist is going to affect, it's going to be a part of what happens with the brush, what it can do for you. So if you want to make, say, a straight line with a brush, which is what a lot of people use their watercolor brushes for, hold it straight down like this and just give it a slight tug on the paper and just move it up with your arm like this. You see there? That gives you a similar line to the line I showed you in the previous quick tip. Now you see, in the direction you want your line to go will be the direction you'll move it. But you move it and lift up, move it and lift up, move it and lift up like that. You see? And then you can notice that if I just barely have the tip touching the paper, I get the thinner line. If I push it, I get a thicker line. If I push it and keep it on the paper and then lift it up, now I lift my arm up, not this, I'll show you that in a minute, not this, but then I can make that line pretty long if I need it long. And the one thing we enjoy about watercolor is its ability to give us spontaneity. And so the way we can use our brushes can determine how that happens. And so if you want to make a long straight line and you want to be fat at the bottom, then you can push the brush down so that its belly enables it to get flat. And then as you pull it in this direction, you can pull it a pretty long ways. You see that with a well-loaded brush. And the amount of pressure, I'm pulling it up now, letting the tip do the work. And of course, the way you move your arm, you see that's the arm that's the movement there. The way you move your arm determines how that stroke is going to go. That's wet on dry. And so usually when we're making specific strokes like this, we'll be doing it on dry paper. We'll be doing it on a painting. We already have washes and other shapes laid in, and this will be on the dry paper that will be on top of what we've already put in. So that's something that will, if you just practice that, the pressure that you put on, the way you load the brush determines how it behaves. Loading it meaning how much paint you have in it, and your ability to control the value of the stroke you're going to use by how much water is here and how much paint gets pulled into that. All that, and you see, as you're loading the brush on your palette, always give it a turn so that the entire belly can load like that. And then you can control the width of the shape and the direction of the shape by the way you move your arm, the whole arm coming from the shoulder. If you need short strokes, you will learn that there's some things you can give. Got that little, that was a little voluntary thing right there. Sometimes you really intentionally want short strokes, that are fat but and tip at the end. You see like this? In that case, your fingers can give that to you. See what I'm doing here? Combination of the fingers and the wrist movement like this. You see that? And so if you want to just make a pile of grasses, something like that, you see what you can do with that? And as I said, spontaneity is one of the things that watercolor can give us. So you can practice doing that sort of thing. There are some specialty things that you can do with a round brush too, by the way you shape the brush. Now, if we get the brush thoroughly dry, not thoroughly dry, get most of the water out of the brush, you see like I'm doing here, you can spread those bristles like this for something that you want to have be textured or grasses or things like that. You can spread the bristles and then just let the brush blot up the paint. Of course, that means that you will already have that paint pulled down. Let the brush, now watch this. Then pull it this way, hold it this way, and pull it up. You see, so you get that nice little textured stuff. It's repetitive strokes, like I'm doing here, and you get that nice little textured stuff, like that. So, learning, practicing these things just on paper that you're not intending to make a painting. You're practicing for the sake of learning how the tool works. Your brush is your tool. It's not a paint applicator. So going through practicing sessions where you learn how that works. Now I want to show you another thing that you can use the round brush to do for you. There again, I'm rinsing the brush, blot it, then go and add the water that I need into it. And again, I'll just pull the paint out here, pulling it from the edge. Always pull from the edge of your little pile, little area of paint there, like that. All right, so that sort of thing. Now, I think I'm going to, well, I got a little ahead of myself. Anyway, if you want to use the round brush to create shapes, you can do something like this, where you can push the round brush around and let the tip of the brush create the shape you're making. Something like this. And you will notice that there are different shapes that you want to make that you can put variations on what I just showed you there in order to create that shape. And that's wet on dry. I'm going to get my flat brush now. And show you what happens now wet on wet. Let's push this up just a little bit. Okay, now to get wet on wet, we can wet the paper. And, well, first of all, I'm going to load this brush. And I'm going to pull the excess water out just like that. So we have a nice little point on it. Now, the degree of wetness on the paper will determine what the round brush, or all brushes can do, but I can show you especially with the round brush. When you wet, you want to wet the area so that you can see an even gloss. And sometimes if you're wetting a small area, that's important. Now, when you're wetting it, once again, if you push too hard, you're going to make piles of water on the paper, and that's going to affect what happens. So we want this area to be an equal gloss. Now, here's what happens. The minute I stop wetting it, it begins to dry. And so if I'm using the round brush on really wet, you see what happens there? That's what happens. Now, sometimes you might want that, like you want a feathering edge. And so you might want to start something like that. And in that case, you want to create the textures that you would want that you can get on wet paper like this. You see what I'm doing? I'm using just the tip there just to make little textures like that. And as that dries, it gets softer and softer. Those edges that we're looking at there get softer and softer and softer. And that can be a part of the painting process. Now, if we keep our eye on the degree of wetness, it reaches a place in wetness where it will do different sorts of things. Now, usually one reason I do most of the quick tips with oil is this very thing of the waiting time for the paper to be the kind of wetness we need for the results we want. And so sometimes when we wet the paper, we might just have to wait for a little while. And I'm just kind of shooting bull here just a little bit while I'm waiting for a little while. But it's important to get your head in a position so that you can see the gloss on the paper, because the amount of gloss on the paper tells you how much water is still there that's going to affect your stroke. Now I've waited here, and the gloss is very gradually beginning to disappear. I'm going to load the brush in the same way I had it loaded before. Just put a stroke down, and you see that doesn't run quite as fast as this did. And so when you have that degree of wetness where it's just shiny on top, it doesn't look puddly, it just looks shiny on top, then this is the kind of edge. Now watch here. You see those little textured edges have already gone away? That's what happens when you use any kind of brush, but especially the round brush, the shapes that you can create with it. When you're using, when you first put those strokes down, you see all this texture. That texture's not going to stay there. And you see, the drier this gets, the more and more that goes away. It gets, and the edges just continue to get softer and softer and softer. A lot of times we're going to want that, like if we're painting distant trees, or we really want to show distance, we don't want those edges to be real sharp. And so using the round brush works especially good for doing that sort of thing if we want to show foliage or trees or forests or lots of kinds of things that would have texture that are in the very distance. But here's about watercolor, is that you don't get the results that you have when you first put the brush stroke down until you're painting wet on dry. When you're painting wet on dry, it pretty much stays the way you created it to begin with. But when you're needing other kinds of results that depend on the degree of wetness of the paper, you don't get the results that appear when you first make those brush strokes like this. Now, I'm prolonging this on purpose because I want you to watch as we're talking. Watch what happens here. And you see this one retains a little bit more of its texture. Most of that will be gone. Now, with the time the time that I have talked here, I'm watching this, I'm watching how this is drying, and it's reached a point right here at the edge where I barely see any wetness at all. I can still see some gloss, so watch what happens if I just put a stroke there. You see that one spreads even slower, but it does push into those edges. As it dries, it will have just a little bit more of texture, but it still will dry a lot softer than, say, you see the difference there between this stroke. That's on dry paper. That's on very, very damp paper. Now, I was hoping that I could wait until I get just a dampness. Well, I'm beginning to get that right now. Just a dampness that where you don't see any gloss at all. After it loses its gloss is a good time to paint soft shapes that you have just a little bit more control over. Let's see what will happen there. Now, that one's still spreading pretty much. So there is a point, now if you're working with multiple shapes here that are side by side, if you want intentional bleeding of a stroke into another shape, then you would stroke when it's this degree of dryness. But at another degree of dryness, what I'm hoping will happen right here before I have to close this out, you will see you'll get just a soft edge, but you won't get the bleeding on it. And if you control the amount of water that's in the brush, I'm going to do a little bit of blotting right here. And let's see what will happen now. About to use up all my space. Let's see what will happen if I stroke right here. There we go. There we go. When you pull the water out of the brush, of course you see I should have, if the paint in the brush had been a little darker, it would be the same value as these. But you see there, it's lost its gloss. There is no gloss there. And so when I made that stroke with a round brush there, it still keeps that edge, but it will dry slightly softer. So the degree of wetness is going to affect the edges. It's going to affect how the color blends, the degree of wetness on the paper. It takes a lot of practice to to figure out what's happening there. But if you're willing to just go through practice after practice, you can take a whole sheet of a good watercolor paper. Now, the kind of watercolor paper you use will determine how all the brushes, how the effect of all the brushes of what you can do with them. But if you're using, I think a good standard quality to start with is the Arches 140 cold press. And if you buy the watercolor blocks or the Arches 140 watercolor pads, those are relatively good to start with. The blocks are excellent because they have the same paper that the watercolor sheets do. So I would say that it's well worth your time and the results you're going to get in the long run to spend a lot of practice time just exploring these things, like just what I've shown you here. You don't have to explore any more than just what I've shown you here. And then when you're in the process of painting watercolor, what you do is look at an image, look at the characteristics of the image, and what do you know that you can do with either the round brush or the flat brush with a certain degree of wetness on the paper that will give you an image that you're looking at, or at least some kind of interpretation of it. I think once you get used to that, you're going to be absolutely surprised at all the other things that a round brush and a flat brush can do for you in watercolor. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.